She was humiliated in front of her neighbors, called a thief in her own driveway, but instead of anger, she chose precision. And in one calculated move, she turned the tables on everyone who doubted her. It happened on one of those mornings that almost felt too peaceful to end badly. The kind where the sun glowed off the rooftops, kids' bikes were tipped over on lawns, and the air smelled faintly like freshly cut grass. Tanya Rhodes had her playlist running on her Bluetooth speaker, washing down her black Lexus RX in the driveway of her brick home in Brookmere, North Carolina. She wasn't rushing. She had the day off from the high school, and cleaning her car had always been her version of therapy. Soap bubbles slid down the side mirror as she hummed along to a song she used to play for her students during exam week. She'd worked hard for this car, 5 years of saving, 3 of paying off her student loans, and 1 of finally allowing herself something nice. But as she wrung out her microfiber towel and stepped back to admire the shine, she saw a shadow move at the corner of her eye. Standing on the curb, arms folded, was Cheryl Donovan, the neighbor who always seemed to find something wrong with everyone's front yard. Tanya had seen her plenty of times before, snapping pictures of trash bins left out too long, pacing with her clipboard during HOA walkarounds, and once even measuring how high a neighbor's grass had grown after a storm. Today, though, she wasn't holding a clipboard. She was holding her phone. Recording. "Excuse me!" Cheryl's voice cut through the air like a sharp edge. "Whose car is that?" Tanya blinked, confused. "Mine," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "That's not possible." Cheryl stepped closer, zooming in on her phone. "That car doesn't belong to you. I know everyone who lives here, and I've never seen you drive that vehicle." Tanya's first instinct was to laugh. She thought maybe Cheryl was joking. She'd seen neighbors pull harmless pranks before. But the look in Cheryl's eyes said otherwise. There was no humor, just accusation. "You're serious?" Tanya asked slowly, her brow furrowing. "Don't play smart," Cheryl snapped. "I'm calling the authorities. We don't need strangers stealing property in this neighborhood." Tanya exhaled sharply. "Strangers? Cheryl, I live here. 208 Meadow Court. Right there." She pointed toward her front door, the one she'd painted sage green last spring. Cheryl kept recording. "I've lived here 22 years, never seen you. And that car," she gestured with her phone, "belongs to the Bensons. They used to live 2 houses down before they moved." Tanya tried to keep her tone calm. "The Bensons sold this car 3 years ago. To me, by now, 2 other neighbors had come out, one with a leash in hand, pretending to walk his dog, the other peering from her porch with crossed arms." Tanya felt a familiar knot form in her stomach, that quiet embarrassment that comes when you realize you're the spectacle. "Can you please stop recording me?" Tanya asked. "You're mistaken." Cheryl didn't stop. "If you're innocent, you've got nothing to hide." Tanya wiped her palms against her jeans, her voice soft but steady. "If you think I stole my own car, call whoever you want. I'll wait right here." Minutes later, the sound of a police siren broke through the calm. 2 officers pulled into the cul-de-sac, their cruiser rolling slowly toward the driveway. Cheryl waved them over as if she'd caught a criminal. "There," she said, pointing. "She's trying to steal that Lexus. I have video." Tanya stood beside her car, arms folded. One officer approached, eyes shifting between the 2 women. "Ma'am, can I see your license and registration?" Tanya handed them over without a word. Her name matched the vehicle. Her address matched the street. Everything lined up perfectly. The officer gave Cheryl a tired look. "Ma'am, this car belongs to her." Cheryl's face reddened. "No, that can't be right. She doesn't live here long enough to own something like that." Tanya tilted her head. "Long enough?" Cheryl's mouth opened, but the words stumbled. The officer cleared his throat. "There's no crime here, ma'am. You can go about your day." The neighbors who had been watching began to retreat, some awkwardly, others whispering to each other. Cheryl muttered something under her breath, still clutching her phone. Tanya didn't respond. She just picked up her towel and went back to wiping down her car. Her hands trembled slightly, but she refused to show it. It should have ended there. But something inside her, something that had been quiet for too long, wasn't willing to let this go. But what Tanya did next would change everything in Brookmere, and make sure Cheryl Donovan would never forget that morning. Brookmere wasn't the kind of place where things got loud. People cut their grass on schedule, waved from a distance, and kept conversations short. Every Christmas, the HOA held a decorum contest for best decorated lawn, though it was less about joy and more about keeping appearances neat for the newsletter. It was the kind of neighborhood where gossip traveled faster than Wi-Fi, and Tanya had learned that the hard way. She'd moved there 3 years earlier from Durham, hoping for a quieter life after years in the city. The house had been a dream, a little more expensive than she planned, but the yard was perfect, and the local high school was just a 10-minute drive away. What she didn't know was that Brookmere came with unspoken rules. You didn't repaint your front door without approval. You didn't leave your trash bin visible after 6 p.m. And if you didn't look like everyone else, people remembered it. Tanya was polite, always smiled, always greeted her neighbors. She joined the community gardening club, brought cookies to the block party her first summer, even offered to volunteer during the HOA's annual cleanup. But every time she tried to fit in, she could feel something invisible, a wall she couldn't break through. People like Cheryl Donovan kept that wall standing tall. Cheryl's house sat 3 lots down from Tanya's, and everyone knew her as the woman who kept Brookmere running right. She wore pastel cardigans, had a spotless front porch, and made it her business to track every leaf, fence post, and dog leash within sight. She wasn't technically the HOA president, but she didn't need to be. She had a louder voice than all of them combined. Tanya remembered her first real encounter with Cheryl. It was during her second week in the neighborhood. She'd parked her car slightly over the sidewalk while unloading groceries. Cheryl appeared, clipboard in hand. "Cars aren't supposed to block pedestrian space," she'd said. No hello, no smile. Tanya apologized, moved the car immediately, and thought that was that. But later that evening, she found an email from the HOA. A friendly reminder about parking guidelines. After that, it became routine. Notes left in her mailbox about her recycling bin, comments on the HOA Facebook page about people who don't read the rules. Nothing ever said her name, but everyone knew who was being talked about. Still, Tanya stayed patient. She told herself it wasn't personal. She'd worked with teenagers for 15 years. She knew how to deal with difficult personalities. But the morning of the car incident was different. It wasn't a passive-aggressive post or a note. It was a public accusation, one that left her standing on her own driveway, surrounded by whispers and judgment. By the time she finished drying her car, she could already feel eyes on her from behind curtains. Every neighborhood had its watchers, and Brookmere's were world-class. Tanya tried to brush it off, to pretend the morning didn't matter. But her phone buzzed around noon. It was a message from Marcia, her friend across the street. "Hey girl," Cheryl posted something on the HOA group. "Said you were involved in a vehicle dispute. You okay?" Tanya's jaw tightened. Vehicle dispute? That wasn't what happened. She opened the group chat. 68 members, mostly quiet, except when someone complained about the pool rules or the landscaper's schedule. But there it was. A post from Cheryl. "Reminder to all residents, please report any suspicious activity. We had an incident this morning involving a vehicle and an unidentified individual. Police were called. Let's stay vigilant." Unidentified individual. Tanya stared at the screen, her chest tightening. Her name wasn't mentioned, but everyone in that chat knew who she was. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcia. "Don't let it get to you. You did nothing wrong," Tanya replied with a simple, "Thanks." But her mind was already somewhere else. She looked out the window at her spotless car, gleaming under the sunlight. The same car that had somehow turned her into a suspect in her own driveway. And for what? Because someone couldn't picture her owning it. That night, as she sat on her couch, the silence in her house felt heavy. She thought about her students, the ones who came to her office crying after being accused of something they didn't do. She'd always told them, "Stay calm. Facts win in the end," but sitting there, replaying the morning in her mind, those words felt thin. She knew this wasn't over. Not because she wanted drama, but because if she stayed quiet, Cheryl would feel justified. The post would stay up, the whispers would continue, and everyone would move on, except her. But Tanya had no idea that the next morning something would happen that would take this neighborhood tension to a whole new level and push her to act in a way no one expected. The following morning, Tanya woke early. She barely slept, her mind replaying Cheryl's words like a broken record. The air was cooler than usual, and the sky had that washed-out grey tone that made everything look tired. She made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at her phone. Cheryl's post was still there, untouched, uncorrected, and worse, it had comments. Unbelievable. Glad someone's keeping an eye out. People need to stop bringing trouble into good neighborhoods. That's why we pay HOA fees, right? Each line stung more than the last. Marcia had left a single comment trying to defend her. I know Tanya. She's lived here for years. Let's not jump to conclusions, but that was drowned out by the noise. Tanya could feel it. The quiet isolation that came from being labeled without a single person asking for her side of the story. She closed the app and pushed the phone aside. Later that morning, she decided to take control of her own narrative. She went outside with her phone and started taking photos of her car, the license plate, the registration sticker, everything. She wasn't sure what she'd do with them yet, but she knew she needed proof. As she was doing it, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Well, look who's documenting again. Tanya turned around. Cheryl stood at the end of her driveway in a pink sweater set, holding a mug that said, Brookmere Strong. Morning, Tanya said flatly. I see you're still here, Cheryl said, glancing toward the car. Where else would I be? Tanya replied. Cheryl's tone had that condescending sweetness that felt like sugar poured over vinegar. You know, people are a little concerned after yesterday. We like to keep things peaceful here. Tanya crossed her arms. Peaceful? You called the police on me for washing my car. I called the police because you refused to identify yourself, Cheryl said defensively. I literally told you my name and address. Tanya shot back. You just didn't believe me. Cheryl's voice rose a little. Well, forgive me for caring about safety. We've had theft before. You know, Tanya took a step closer. You thought I was stealing from my own driveway. A few houses down, a man watering his lawn turned down his hose, pretending not to watch. Tanya noticed him, and so did Cheryl, which only made Cheryl straighten her posture, as if she were performing for an audience. I don't make assumptions, Cheryl said, voice sharp. I go by what I see. What you saw, Tanya replied, was me washing my car. But what you decided was something else entirely. Cheryl's mouth twitched. Maybe if you introduced yourself to more people, there wouldn't be confusion. Or maybe, Tanya said, her voice firm but even. People should stop assuming who belongs where. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet of the cul-de-sac pressed around them, the tension thick enough to feel. Cheryl finally broke the silence. Well, I suppose you'll be filing a complaint then. I don't need to, Tanya said. You already did that for me. Online. She turned and walked back toward her garage, her steps slow but steady. Cheryl stood there, speechless, for once without a comeback. Inside, Tanya's hands trembled as she set her phone down. She wasn't angry. Not yet. Just tired. Tired of being polite. Tired of pretending ignorance was harmless. She poured another cup of coffee and thought about what to do next. Around noon, her phone buzzed again. This time it was from Principal Warren, her boss at the high school. Tanya, everything okay? I got a strange email this morning. Someone from your neighborhood forwarded a video of you and the police from yesterday. Her stomach dropped. A video? She replied. Yeah, he wrote. Said there was an incident. I told them it's none of their business, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Tanya closed her eyes. Cheryl had shared it. By the time evening came, the entire community was whispering about the car situation. Even parents from her school texted her in concern. It wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was becoming a story. And in this version, Tanya was the problem. She walked outside as the sun dipped low, the streetlights flickering on. Cheryl's house sat dark except for the faint glow of a television in the living room. Tanya stood in her driveway, looking at her car, the one she'd worked so hard for. She whispered to herself, "You wanted attention, Cheryl." Fine. She turned on her phone's camera, looked straight into the lens, and began to speak. My name is Tanya Rhodes. I live in Brookmere, North Carolina. Yesterday my neighbor accused me of stealing my own car. Here's what really happened. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't curse or insult. She just told the truth. Every detail. Calmly, clearly, powerfully. Then she posted the video. But Tanya didn't know that by the next morning, her video wouldn't just reach Brookmere. It would reach the entire town, and the story would take a life of its own. By sunrise the next day, Tanya's video had over 10,000 views. She hadn't meant for it to go viral. It was just her way of defending herself, putting facts out where the whispers couldn't twist them. But the internet had its own rules, and Brookmere was about to learn them. The video spread through local Facebook groups, then onto Reddit, then TikTok. People shared it with captions like, HOA gone wrong, and she handled that better than anyone else could. It wasn't dramatic, but that was what made it powerful. Tanya's calmness, the measured tone, the exhaustion in her eyes, struck a nerve. Still, while people online were applauding her, things on the ground felt very different. That morning, she noticed something odd. A police cruiser parked 2 blocks away. It wasn't uncommon to see patrol cars in Brookmere, but this one lingered. Every time Tanya stepped outside, she could see it from the corner of her eye. The officers inside didn't approach her. They just sat, windows rolled up, watching. When she left her driveway to go grab groceries, the car followed. Not close, but close enough to make her uneasy. By the time she got back, Cheryl was standing on her porch again, phone in hand, pretending to text. Tanya walked over. You've got something to say. Cheryl looked up. I've got nothing to say to someone who tries to start online drama. Drama? Tanya asked. You called the police on me, Cheryl. You filmed it? Then you shared it. I'm the one dealing with your consequences. You made this public, Cheryl said, crossing her arms. You could have just let it go. Tanya stared at her, speechless for a moment. Let it go? You humiliated me in front of the neighborhood. You turned a peaceful morning into a circus. Why should I let that go? Cheryl's tone sharpened. You think posting it online helps? You've made Brookmere look like a bunch of villains. Maybe it's time Brookmere saw itself for what it is, Tanya said quietly. Before Cheryl could respond, the sound of tires crunching against pavement cut through the tension. The same police cruiser from earlier turned into the cul-de-sac and stopped in front of them. The passenger side door opened, and Officer Ramirez stepped out, the same man who had responded to Cheryl's call 2 days earlier. He adjusted his sunglasses and nodded slightly. Morning, ladies. Tanya kept her arms folded. Morning, officer. I just came by to check in, Ramirez said. We've been getting a lot of calls from this street. Tanya glanced toward Cheryl. From who? Ramirez sighed. Anonymous complaints, mostly about noise, suspicious activity, nothing serious. But since your video started circulating, people are a little on edge. Cheryl quickly jumped in. I never called anyone today. You can check the logs. He gave her a look that said he didn't believe that for a second. That's fine, Mom. I'm just here to remind everyone to keep things civil. Social media can make small issues turn into big ones real fast. Tanya nodded. I didn't post it to cause trouble. I just wanted people to see the truth. I get that, he said. But just be careful. Some people don't like when the truth makes them look bad. He tipped his cap, got back in his car, and drove off. Tanya watched him leave, her mind spinning with what he'd just said. Cheryl's voice broke the silence. See? Even he says you stirred things up. Tanya turned to face her. No, Cheryl. What he said was that people don't like accountability. For a moment, Cheryl's face went pale. She opened her mouth but didn't reply. That night, the story hit the local news. Neighborhood dispute sparks online outrage in Brookmere. The headline read. Tanya's name wasn't in the title, but her face was in the thumbnail. The report played clips from her video and statements from neighbors, some supportive, others defensive. Cheryl even gave a brief interview outside her home, claiming she had acted out of concern for community safety. Watching the segment from her couch, Tanya felt her stomach twist. Cheryl's voice came through the TV. This isn't about race or anything like that. It's about following neighborhood rules and keeping our area safe. I did what anyone would have done. Tanya muted the screen. Anyone? She whispered. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters asking for interviews, friends checking in, even a message from a civil rights group offering legal support. But the one message that stuck out came from an unknown number. You handled yourself with grace. Don't stop now. People are watching how you respond next. She didn't know who sent it, but it hit her deeply. Tanya had never wanted to be a symbol or a headline, but now she realized she had something Cheryl never expected her to have, an audience, and with that came power. But what Tanya decided to do with that power the next day would turn everything upside down and leave the entire HOA scrambling for damage control. By Friday morning, Tanya's street looked the same on the surface, trimmed lawns, flags fluttering gently in the breeze. But everything underneath had changed. People who once waved politely now looked away. Cars slowed when passing her house, as if the drivers were trying to catch a glimpse of the woman from the video. At first, Tanya tried to ignore it. She drove to work like nothing had happened, kept her usual calm around her students, and smiled through the day. But at lunch, one of her co-workers pulled her aside. "Hey," said Janet Cole, the math teacher she usually shared coffee breaks with. "I saw something on Facebook. About your neighborhood. Are you okay?" Tanya hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired of having to prove things that shouldn't need proving," Janet sighed. "I get it. People love drama. Just remember, you didn't do anything wrong." Tanya smiled faintly, grateful but not convinced. On her way home that evening, she passed through downtown Greensboro, where the streets buzzed with their usual late-week rhythm. She pulled into a small diner she liked, Frankie's Grill, and sat by the window. As she sipped her iced tea, she scrolled through her phone, checking the comments on her latest post. Some were kind. "We're with you. You handled that with grace." But others were cruel. Maybe she's just looking for attention. Always playing the victim card. Her chest tightened. The internet could turn sympathy into suspicion overnight. She locked her phone, finished her drink, and drove home as the sky dimmed into shades of violet. Pulling into her driveway, she saw something new. A note taped to her mailbox. She froze, the headlights cutting across the paper. It read, "You don't belong here. Leave before things get worse." Her hands clenched on the steering wheel. For a long moment, she just sat there. The stillness of the street felt heavier than usual. Then she got out, ripped the note off, and walked inside. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she grabbed her laptop and opened a new document. If people wanted to watch her, she'd give them something real to see. That's when the idea came to her. Not revenge, not payback, but exposure. Real exposure. She called her cousin Renee, a journalist in Charlotte who had spent years covering stories about discrimination and community disputes. "Renee, it's me," Tanya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need your advice. Something happened here, and it's getting bigger." Renee's tone was instantly alert. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Tanya explained everything. The accusation, the video, the note. There was a pause. Then Renee said, "Tanya, this isn't just neighborhood drama anymore. You've got documentation, witnesses, a viral video. This is a story that needs daylight." "I don't want attention," Tanya said softly. "I just want the truth on record." "That's exactly what attention does," Renee replied. "It makes truth harder to bury." They talked for nearly an hour. By the end of the call, Tanya had a plan. She would hold the HOA accountable, not by arguing in the comments section, but by confronting them directly, in person, where they couldn't twist her words. That night, she printed everything: screenshots, posts, Cheryl's video, even the HOA group chat messages. Each sheet of paper was a piece of the puzzle. She placed them neatly into a binder, labeled it Incident Record, May 2025, and set it by the door. The next morning, Tanya arrived at the HOA office, a small beige building behind the community pool, and asked to speak during the board's open session. Cheryl was already there, sitting among the members with her arms folded and her usual smug confidence. When Tanya's turn came, she stood in front of the group and placed the binder on the table. Her voice was steady, but carried through the room. On April 27th, I was accused by my neighbor of stealing my own car. That accusation was recorded, shared, and circulated publicly. I was called a stranger and an unidentified individual in my own neighborhood. The police verified ownership immediately, but that wasn't enough. Because even after proof, the harassment didn't stop. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Cheryl stared straight ahead, pretending not to react. Tanya continued. I've lived here 3 years. I've paid every HOA fee on time. I've followed every rule, and yet I'm treated like I don't belong. So here's my question. What exactly does belonging mean here? Silence. She let it hang in the air, the weight of it pressing on every person in the room. Finally, the HOA president cleared his throat. Ms. Rhodes, we'll review your concerns and respond formally. Tanya smiled politely. Good. I'll be waiting. And so will everyone who's already seen what happened. Then she gathered her binder, turned, and walked out. By Friday morning, Tanya's street looked the same on the surface, trimmed lawns, flags fluttering gently in the breeze. But everything underneath had changed. People who once waved politely now looked away. Cars slowed when passing her house, as if the drivers were trying to catch a glimpse of the woman from the video. At first, Tanya tried to ignore it. She drove to work like nothing had happened, kept her usual calm around her students, and smiled through the day. But at lunch, one of her co-workers pulled her aside. Hey, said Janet Cole, the math teacher she usually shared coffee breaks with. I saw something on Facebook about your neighborhood. Are you okay? Tanya hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired of having to prove things that shouldn't need proving. Janet sighed. I get it. People love drama. Just remember, you didn't do anything wrong. Tanya smiled faintly, grateful, but not convinced. On her way home that evening, she passed through downtown Greensboro, where the streets buzzed with their usual late-week rhythm. She pulled into a small diner she liked, Frankie's Grill, and sat by the window. As she sipped her iced tea, she scrolled through her phone, checking the comments on her latest post. Some were kind. We're with you. You handled that with grace. But others were cruel. Maybe she's just looking for attention. Always playing the victim card. Her chest tightened. The internet could turn sympathy into suspicion overnight. She locked her phone, finished her drink, and drove home as the sky dimmed into shades of violet. Pulling into her driveway, she saw something new. A note taped to her mailbox. She froze, the headlights cutting across the paper. It read, You don't belong here. Leave before things get worse. Her hands clenched on the steering wheel. For a long moment, she just sat there. The stillness of the street felt heavier than usual. Then she got out, ripped the note off, and walked inside. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she grabbed her laptop and opened a new document. If people wanted to watch her, she'd give them something real to see. That's when the idea came to her. Not revenge, not payback, but exposure. Real exposure. She called her cousin Renee, a journalist in Charlotte, who had spent years covering stories about discrimination and community disputes. Renee, it's me, Tanya said, trying to keep her voice steady. I need your advice. Something happened here, and it's getting bigger. Renee's tone was instantly alert. Talk to me. What's going on? Tanya explained everything. The accusation, the video, the note. There was a pause. Then Renee said, Tanya, this isn't just neighborhood drama anymore. You've got documentation, witnesses, a viral video. This is a story that needs daylight. I don't want attention, Tanya said softly. I just want the truth on record. That's exactly what attention does, Renee replied. It makes truth harder to bury. They talked for nearly an hour. By the end of the call, Tanya had a plan. She would hold the HOA accountable, not by arguing in the comments section, but by confronting them directly, in person, where they couldn't twist her words. That night, she printed everything. Screenshots, posts, Cheryl's video, even the HOA group chat messages. Each sheet of paper was a piece of the puzzle. She placed them neatly into a binder, labeled it Incident Record, May 2025, and set it by the door. The next morning, Tanya arrived at the HOA office, a small beige building behind the community pool, and asked to speak during the board's open session. Cheryl was already there, sitting among the members with her arms folded and her usual smug confidence. When Tanya's turn came, she stood in front of the group and placed the binder on the table. Her voice was steady, but carried through the room. On April 27th, I was accused by my neighbor of stealing my own car. That accusation was recorded, shared, and circulated publicly. I was called a stranger and an unidentified individual in my own neighborhood. The police verified ownership immediately, but that wasn't enough, because even after proof, the harassment didn't stop. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Cheryl stared straight ahead, pretending not to react. Tanya continued. I've lived here 3 years. I've paid every HOA fee on time. I've followed every rule, and yet I'm treated like I don't belong. So here's my question. What exactly does belonging mean here? Silence. She let it hang in the air, the weight of it pressing on every person in the room. Finally, the HOA president cleared his throat. Ms. Rhodes, we'll review your concerns and respond formally. Tanya smiled politely. Good. I'll be waiting. And so will everyone who's already seen what happened. Then she gathered her binder, turned, and walked out. Outside, the afternoon sun hit her face. For the first time in days, she felt something shift inside her. Not peace, not relief, but resolve. But she didn't realize that Cheryl wasn't done. That night, Cheryl would make one last move. And this time, Tanya would answer in a way no one could ignore. That night, Tanya sat in her living room, the faint buzz of the ceiling fan mixing with the low hum of her refrigerator. She'd done everything right. She'd gone through the proper channels, spoken calmly, kept her dignity intact. Yet deep down, she knew it wouldn't be enough. Brookmere was the kind of place where gossip held more power than truth. The next morning, she'd be back to square one. Cheryl smiling for the cameras again, neighbors pretending not to know anything, and the HOA brushing it all aside. But then, her phone pinged. A notification popped up from an unfamiliar account. At Brookmere Watch, followed by a message. You should see what Cheryl's posting now. Her stomach sank. She clicked the link. There it was. A blurry, zoomed-in photo of Tanya taken from across the street, posted just an hour earlier. The caption read, Suspicious activity continues. Neighbors should remain alert. It had 5 comments already. She's still causing trouble? Why hasn't the HOA done something? I knew it wasn't over. Tanya stared at the screen in disbelief. Cheryl had created a fake neighborhood account, pretending to be a community watch, just to keep feeding the narrative. That was the breaking point. She put down her phone, stood up, and whispered, All right, Cheryl, you want a show? Let's give you one. The idea came to her like lightning. Fast, dangerous, but clear. She wasn't going to argue online anymore. She was going to pull back the curtain completely. She opened her laptop and logged into Facebook, creating a new group called Brookmere Truth. Her first post was simple. If you've ever been targeted, silenced, or humiliated by this HOA, this is your space. Share your story. Within minutes, 2 people joined, then 5, then 20. By morning, there were over 100 members. Posts began to flood in, stories of unfair fines, warnings for petty issues, and selective enforcement of rules. One woman wrote, They told me my son's car was too loud, even though other teenagers had the same model. When I complained, they said I was being defensive. Another added, They fined me for having patio furniture that wasn't aesthetic, but Cheryl has plastic flamingos in her yard. Every story pointed to the same small group, the same pattern of control, humiliation, and favoritism. And Cheryl's name kept coming up. Tanya read each post, her pulse quickening. The anger she'd been swallowing all week transformed into clarity. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. That afternoon, she called Renee again. Remember that story you said needed daylight? Tanya said. Renee's tone sharpened. Yeah. Well, it's about to get it. Renee promised to send a local TV crew the next morning. Tanya didn't hesitate. She told them everything. Not just about her experience, but about the pattern of behavior across Brookmere. She even shared screenshots from the fake Brookmere Watch account. By evening, the story aired on WSOC Channel 9 under the headline, "Homeowner exposes HOA harassment pattern in Greensboro subdivision." The broadcast was short, but powerful. Footage of Tanya speaking calmly on her porch. Clips from neighbors confirming they'd been targeted too. The news anchor mentioned that the HOA was under review for possible misconduct. When Cheryl saw it, she exploded. The next morning, she stormed up Tanya's driveway, fuming. "You had no right to do that!" she yelled, voice trembling. "You're ruining our community's reputation!" Tanya was ready for her. She had her phone recording before Cheryl even got close. "I didn't ruin anything," Tanya said steadily. "I just told the truth." Cheryl's eyes darted to the phone. "Turn that off right now." "No," Tanya replied. "You like recording people, remember?" Cheryl's face turned red. She lunged forward, snatching at Tanya's phone, but Tanya stepped back just in time. The motion triggered the automatic porch light, casting both women in harsh white light. "Touch me again," Tanya said quietly. "And this goes straight to the police." For a moment, Cheryl froze. The rage in her face flickered into something else. Fear. Then she turned and stomped away, muttering curses under her breath. Tanya lowered her phone slowly. Her hands were shaking, but her expression stayed firm. That video, the one she'd recorded without saying much at all, would become the final nail in Cheryl's campaign. By sunset, it was everywhere online, Cheryl yelling, lunging, her voice cracking under anger. Tanya standing still, calm, composed. The next day, Cheryl's account was deleted. Her role in the HOA temporarily suspended pending investigation. For the first time in 3 years, Tanya walked down her street without feeling small. People didn't look away anymore. Some even smiled awkwardly, unsure how to face her after watching everything unfold. But she didn't care. She wasn't looking for approval, only respect. But Tanya didn't know that the HOA board's next meeting would dig up even more, and the truth waiting there would shake the neighborhood's image of itself to the core. By the next morning, Brookmere wasn't just gossiping anymore. It was unraveling from the inside. Tanya's second video, the one showing Cheryl lunging at her, had spread even faster than the first. Local outlets picked it up, then regional ones. A community that once prided itself on its peaceful image was now a headline for all the wrong reasons. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Flyers were taped to mailboxes, and emails went out urging residents to maintain order and refrain from public speculation. But it was too late. Tanya didn't plan on attending that meeting. She'd said what she needed to say. Yet when Marcia came knocking on her door that afternoon, she hesitated. "You should come," Marcia urged. "They're spinning things already, saying you edited the videos, that it's all taken out of context." Tanya exhaled through her nose. "Of course they are. People believe you, Tanya," Marcia continued. "But you need to be in that room," so she went. The community center was full, rows of folding chairs filled with residents who usually avoided anything that looked like confrontation. The air smelled faintly like coffee and tension. At the front, 5 board members sat behind a long table. Cheryl was there too, sitting off to the side, arms folded, sunglasses on indoors. When Tanya entered, heads turned. Conversations dipped into whispers. She didn't break stride. She walked straight to the back, took a seat, and waited. The HOA president, Howard Briggs, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss recent events and misinformation circulating online that has unfortunately cast our community in a negative light." Murmurs filled the room. Tanya stayed quiet, hands clasped in her lap. Howard continued, "We want to assure residents that this board takes all accusations seriously. Mrs. Donovan," he gestured toward Cheryl, "has served this community with dedication for years. We believe the current narrative is unfair and one-sided." A few heads nodded. A few frowned. Then someone stood up. A man from 2 streets over, gray-haired, wearing a baseball cap. "With all due respect," he said, "I saw those videos." She didn't edit anything. Cheryl was out of line. If this is how we're representing Brookmere, then maybe we've got the wrong people in charge. The room broke into a low rumble of agreement. Cheryl's lips tightened. Howard tried to regain control. "Sir, please." But another voice cut in. "No, he's right," said Angela Ruiz, one of the homeowners who had posted in Tanya's Facebook group. "I've lived here 7 years. I've gotten fines for things no one else gets fined for. Cheryl said it was because I didn't read the guidelines. It's the same story every time. Rules for some, exceptions for others." The murmurs grew louder. Cheryl finally stood up, her voice sharp. "You don't know what you're talking about. I've spent my life keeping this neighborhood decent. If some people can't handle a little structure, maybe they don't belong in Brookmere." That last sentence hit the room like a slap. Tanya stood. "Say that again?" The crowd quieted. Cheryl froze. Tanya walked slowly to the front, eyes locked on her. "You've spent weeks calling me suspicious, dangerous, untrustworthy. And now you're saying people like me don't belong. You realize everyone in this room just heard that?" Cheryl's mouth opened, but the words faltered. Tanya turned to the board. "You said you take accusations seriously. So here's mine. This board has allowed discrimination to hide behind rules for years. And it's not just me. It's anyone who doesn't fit your idea of what Brookmere should look like." A few people clapped softly. Then more joined in. Howard tried to restore order, but the energy had shifted completely. People started voicing complaints right there. Unfair landscaping fees, ignored maintenance requests, double standards on property checks. The board couldn't keep up. Within an hour, what was supposed to be a controlled meeting turned into a full reckoning. Cheryl left halfway through, slamming the door on her way out. By evening, the HOA group chat, once silent except for reminders about trash bins and community barbecues, was flooded with demands for change. Marcia texted Tanya later that night. "They're voting next week. Cheryl's position might actually be revoked." Tanya didn't smile. She just stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't satisfaction she felt. It was exhaustion. She hadn't wanted to destroy anyone. She just wanted peace. But peace, she realized, didn't come from silence. The next morning, she went for a walk. It was early, the sky still pale with dawn. A few neighbors waved, tentative, unsure. But this time, their gestures felt real. Not polite, not performative. When she got back home, a note was taped to her door. Her heart skipped for a second, but this one was different. It read, "Thank you for standing up. Some of us were scared too, but you gave us courage." Tanya held the paper in her hand, her throat tightening. For the first time since the whole ordeal began, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. But just as Brookmere started to feel calmer, the HOA's internal review uncovered something even darker, and it would show everyone that Cheryl's behavior was only the tip of the iceberg. The HOA's internal review began quietly, a formality, according to Howard Briggs. Standard procedure, he'd told residents in an email, though everyone knew it was damage control. But within a week, standard procedure turned into something the board couldn't contain. A handful of residents had started asking for transparency. They wanted to see the HOA's correspondence, warnings, fines, citations. They wanted numbers, names, and dates. Howard hesitated at first, but the pressure became too much. The board reluctantly released copies of recent complaints, stretching back 2 years. It was all there, in black and white. The pattern was unmistakable. Out of nearly 80 written warnings sent by the HOA, over 60 had gone to just 7 households, all of them people of color or families who had moved in within the last 3 years. The reasons were trivial: lawn too dry, fence too high, kids too loud. Some fines were doubled without explanation. And every single one of those notices bore the same initials at the bottom. C.D. Cheryl Donovan. Tanya sat at her dining table, flipping through the leaked documents on her tablet. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from neighbors. "I just found out Cheryl fined me for a non-approved mailbox design. I used the one the HOA gave me. She reported me for unauthorized gatherings. It was my kid's birthday. They threatened to revoke my pool key because my cousin visited too often. The more she read, the clearer it became. This wasn't about her car. It was about control, about one woman's quiet authority left unchecked for far too long. Marcia called that evening, her voice charged with energy. "They've got reporters outside Cheryl's house." "She's refusing to talk." Tanya rubbed her forehead. "I didn't want it to go this far." "I know," Marcia said. "But maybe it needed to." Meanwhile, the HOA board scrambled to distance itself. Howard issued a public statement claiming they had no knowledge of individual misconduct and that the association was committed to fairness. Few believed him. The following week, a special meeting was scheduled, this one open to all residents and the press. Tanya didn't plan to speak. She'd had enough confrontation to last a lifetime, but Renee, her cousin, called that morning. "Don't miss it," Renee said firmly. "People will be watching. This isn't just your story anymore. It's everyone's." When Tanya arrived, the parking lot outside the community center was full. Local news vans lined the curb, cables snaking across the asphalt. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, equal parts anger, shame, and anticipation. Howard sat at the head of the table, sweat beading at his temple. Cheryl wasn't there. The meeting began with the usual formalities, but no one cared about the agenda. Residents raised their hands one after another, voices overlapping, frustration spilling into the open. "I want to know why I was fined for patio furniture when Cheryl's yard looked like a yard sale. She came to my house to take pictures of my husband washing our truck. She reported my teenage daughter for walking home too late from practice." Each voice added weight to the room. Tanya stayed quiet, listening. Then a woman stood up near the back, someone Tanya hadn't seen before. She introduced herself as Deborah Lynn, a retired teacher who had lived in Brookmere since it was built. "I was here when this community started," she said. "And it was supposed to be about togetherness, not control. Somewhere along the line, we forgot that. We let one person's fear decide who belonged." The room went still. Deborah turned toward Tanya. "You reminded us what courage looks like. You didn't scream, you didn't fight, you stood your ground. And that woke everyone up." Tanya felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected anyone to say that out loud. Howard finally cleared his throat. "Mrs. Donovan has resigned her position, effective immediately. A new board election will be held next month." A few people clapped, cautiously at first, then louder. Howard continued, "We'll also be instituting an external audit of our HOA procedures and reviewing past complaints. We owe our residents better." Tanya exhaled, her body relaxing for what felt like the first time in weeks. The noise in the room blurred into a soft background hum. Voices talking, laughing, maybe even healing. When the meeting adjourned, several neighbors approached her, one after another. Some apologized. Others thanked her. A few simply shook her hand, their faces saying what words couldn't. As Tanya stepped outside into the fading evening light, she saw the news cameras still rolling. Reporters called out her name, asking for a comment. She paused, thinking. Then she said quietly, "All I ever wanted was to live in peace." Maybe now we can finally start doing that. The clip would air later that night, playing over shots of families walking dogs, kids riding bikes, and porch lights flickering on. The same neighborhood, but different now. But peace in Brookmere didn't come instantly. For some, the truth was uncomfortable. And for Tanya, it was time to decide what to do with the respect she'd finally earned, whether to let things settle or make sure the change lasted. 2 weeks after the public meeting, Brookmere felt quieter, but not the kind of silence born from fear. It was a pause, a collective breath. The storm had passed, but everyone was still looking around, taking stock of what was left. The HOA office stayed busy for days after Cheryl's resignation. Residents stopped by to review their files, some to demand refunds, others just to see proof that their complaints had been real all along. The new interim president, Angela Ruiz, worked tirelessly to rebuild trust. As for Tanya, she did her best to stay out of the spotlight. The media had stopped calling, the news vans were gone, and for the first time in weeks, she could walk outside without someone pulling out a phone. She even started gardening again, something she'd stopped doing after Cheryl's endless notes about approved plant colors. She knelt in the soil one Saturday morning, planting marigolds along the walkway. The sun felt warm on her shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel watched. Marcia came by, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You're getting famous for those flowers," she teased. Tanya laughed softly. "Guess it's safer than washing my car." They shared a quiet moment, sipping coffee, looking at the calm street. A few kids were playing catch on the corner. The neighborhood looked almost normal again. "You ever think Cheryl might apologize?" Marcia asked. Tanya hesitated. "Maybe, but I don't need her to." Marcia tilted her head. "You sure?" Tanya nodded slowly. "People like her don't say sorry because they think they're right." But she lost her power, and that's apology enough. That night, as the sun dipped low, Tanya got a knock on her door. She opened it to find a teenage girl standing nervously on the porch. It was Leah, Cheryl's granddaughter. "Hi, Ms. Rhodes," she said quietly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Tanya nodded and stepped aside. Leah stood just inside the doorway, clutching the strap of her backpack. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," she said, "for what my grandma did. She told me her side of things, but after watching the videos, Her voice cracked slightly. She was wrong. Tanya felt her chest tighten. The girl's sincerity caught her off guard. "You don't have to apologize for her," Tanya said gently. "I know," Leah replied. "But I want to. She doesn't listen to anyone. I just didn't want you to think everyone in my family's like that." Tanya smiled softly. "I don't. It takes guts to come here, Leah. You did the right thing." The girl nodded, visibly relieved. As she turned to leave, Tanya called out, "Hey, your grandma's going to have a lot of time to think. Maybe one day she'll understand what you already do." After Leah left, Tanya sat in the quiet of her living room, the evening light spilling across the floor. For the first time since that day in her driveway, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and peace. The next week, the HOA board announced their new policy changes publicly. Every complaint would now be reviewed by multiple members, not just one. Anonymous reports would no longer be accepted. Diversity training sessions were added for all board members. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a start. On Sunday, Tanya attended her first community barbecue since moving in. For once, people didn't whisper when she arrived. They waved, smiled, even joked about the viral video. Someone played music, and a few neighbors offered her a plate before she even asked. Howard approached her cautiously, holding a cup of lemonade. "Miss Rhodes," he said, voice awkward but sincere, "I want to say thank you for how you handled everything. You could have made this ugly, but you didn't." Tanya gave a faint smile. "It got ugly on its own. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." He nodded slowly. "Still, you changed things here for the better." She looked around the park, families laughing, kids running through sprinklers, the air light with conversation. "Maybe," she said quietly. "I just hope people remember it when the next problem shows up." As the sun set behind the rooftops, Tanya walked home, the sound of laughter fading behind her. She stopped by her car, the same Lexus that had started everything, and ran her hand along the door. It was spotless, reflecting the glow of the evening sky. For once, it didn't remind her of accusation or anger. It just looked like what it always was, something she'd worked for, something she earned. She smiled, locked it, and headed inside. Peace didn't mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming what others tried to take away. Your right to belong, your right to breathe freely. But Tanya wasn't just walking away from conflict that night. She was walking toward something new, something that would turn her personal stand into a message that would reach far beyond Brookmere. In the weeks that followed, Tanya's life slowly returned to something that felt close to normal, but not the same kind of normal she'd known before. This time, she walked through Brookmere with her head held a little higher, her pace a little slower, her presence fully claimed. People greeted her differently now. The same neighbors who once averted their eyes began stopping to chat, asking how she was doing, even offering help with her garden. Some of it was guilt, she could tell, but most of it was genuine. Real understanding had begun to grow where silence used to sit. The HOA moved forward under new leadership. The policies Tanya had demanded in that meeting were implemented one by one. Transparency reports, public complaint logs, term limits for board members, rules that ensured no one person could ever have the kind of unchecked authority Cheryl once wielded. And Cheryl, she moved out quietly 2 months later. No big announcement, no goodbye post, just a moving truck early one Saturday morning, before anyone else was awake. When Tanya stepped outside and saw the empty porch across the street, she didn't feel satisfaction, just release. The cycle had ended, but change doesn't stop at property lines. A few weeks after Cheryl's departure, Tanya got an invitation in her email. It was from a local university that hosted annual forums on community relations and bias in housing. They wanted her to speak. Her first instinct was to decline. She wasn't an activist, she thought. She was just a school counselor who wanted peace in her own neighborhood. But as she read the message again, she realized that maybe that's exactly why they wanted her. Because she was ordinary. Because she represented every person who'd ever had to stay calm when humiliated, who'd ever chosen grace when anger might have been easier. So she said yes. On the day of the forum, Tanya stood behind a wooden podium in a modest lecture hall at Guildford College. Dozens of faces watched her, students, professors, homeowners, even a few reporters who remembered her name. She started simply. 3 months ago, I was accused of stealing my own car, she said. What followed wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was about the kind of quiet prejudice that hides in plain sight, the kind that smiles to your face, waves from across the street, and still finds a way to remind you that you don't belong. The room stayed silent, listening. I could have shouted back. I could have cursed her out, and maybe some people would have said I had every right to. But that's not who I am. I decided to fight differently, by staying calm, by showing proof, by letting her own words expose her. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. Some people told me I was brave. I wasn't. I was tired. Tired of watching people like me be disrespected and then told to move on. But what I learned is that staying silent doesn't keep the peace. It protects the problem. And when you finally decide to stand up, even in the smallest way, that's when things start to change. A few people nodded. Others scribbled notes. Tanya continued. Brookmere changed because people stopped pretending. Because neighbors finally looked at each other instead of looking away. And that's what accountability really is. It's seeing someone's humanity and admitting where we went wrong. When she finished, the audience applauded softly. Not the loud, performative kind, but the genuine kind that lingers. Afterward, several attendees came up to thank her. One woman, a teacher from another county, said, "Your story reminded me why I can't stay quiet at my own job." Driving home that evening, Tanya rolled her window down and let the cool air fill the car. The highway stretched ahead, long and open, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She wasn't just Tanya Rhodes from Brookmere anymore. She was the woman who changed how a community saw itself. When she pulled into her driveway, she glanced at her car, the same black Lexus RX gleaming under the porch light. It no longer felt like the spark of conflict. It felt like victory. Quiet, earned, and permanent. She walked inside, sat down, and opened her laptop. The Brookmere Truth Group was still active, but calmer now. Mostly updates, small wins, and positive exchanges between neighbors who once avoided each other. She typed a short post. Change doesn't start with anger. It starts when we refuse to accept disrespect as normal. Don't wait for permission to stand your ground. Be your own proof. She hit post, leaned back in her chair, and smiled. Tanya's story wasn't about revenge or exposure. It was about reclaiming her peace, and in doing so, giving others permission to reclaim theirs. So if you're watching this and thinking about that one moment when someone made you feel small, remember Tanya. Remember how she stood in her driveway, accused of theft, and answered not with rage, but with truth. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm, stand tall, and make the world see you as you are. No explanations needed. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that remind us what dignity, courage and grace look like in everyday life. And always remember, your voice matters more than their assumptions.